And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat. They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, and everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
You're having, for the most part, a calm summer. It just has not felt like a calm couple of weeks on a number of different levels here across the world, of course. But welcome to a summer edition of the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks. You can subscribe or wherever you get your audio as well. As it's been a week of been an off season. There's some very interesting things going on. Got Dan Stevenson from Fireside Chat here as well, taking some time out of his busy summer, coming in. Were you out of the country? You're leaving the country, or
I was in California in the LA area for about 11 days, and then I'm going to BC soon here.
Oh, well, how fun! And
I'll be going to Nelson for a week.
Oh, well, that's fun. That is the home of course, maybe a little later on you can go into watch some BCHL games if you would. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be playing while I'm there in mid-August, but yeah.
Oh, that's true. That's very true as well. I also
I've seen the Nelson Leafs play in the past, but I won't be seeing them on this trip.
Oh, there we go. Okay, hang on a second here. I'm having to just make sure that everything is kind of going on my end here. Yeah, we do. Okay, I forgot to got that on Twitter. Yes. We are
old music for you.
Yeah, I'm just making sure we got everything set up. There we go. We are moving, and we're on. We should be on live on Twitter now too, hopefully. If not, of course, we're on wherever you get your audio stream. So anyway, how has your summer been?
It's been good. It's interesting. I mean, we've got ash falling from the sky here in Calgary, unfortunately, and shout out to everyone in Jasper who's going through what they're going through. Redcross.ca if you want to donate to help those people, which I would encourage everybody, whether monetarily or otherwise, find a way to help. Jasper is a town that I think is iconic to everyone in Alberta, a lot of people in BC, even if you can't afford money. There's so many ways to help these people right now. And I know a neighbor of mine was bringing some old blankets and stuff to one of the shelters they've got set up. And just, anything you can do. There's all sorts of ways you can find online to help the people of Jasper right now.
Yeah, they certainly do need that for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the images. I mean, when I left work on, I want to say, was it Wednesday, just seeing the pictures, it just was kind of harrowing to see what that whole situation was. Now, thankfully, in terms of lives, it's been good, but the damage, emotionally, the damage has been quite devastating, and the concern
and like all of our cities within our national parks, there's a lot of historic buildings that we'll lose that'll probably never be rebuilt. That town will never look the same again.
No. What I do, hopefully, and what happens now is a lot of people that didn't take the opportunity to visit Jasper, had that at their bucket list item, make it a destination now, and that's one of the way that it restores the tourist things. But
and I know a couple that was supposed to get married in Jasper in 3 weeks from now, and obviously they can't now. And it's been great to see the Calgary community pitching in, and people saying, "Oh, we have I saw on Facebook that someone has a farmhouse outside Calgary that they've donated for use," and it's just great to see people stepping in to get that done. The bakery they were going to use is gone, so some local Calgarians have stepped up to bake a cake for them, and it's great to see.
Yeah, for sure. It absolutely is.
But let's talk about something less sad. Let's talk about hockey.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about something that has, well, we have shovels in the ground here, Dan, for the new event center / hockey arena / whatever you want to call it. And I think that people, I think the overwhelming feeling of the new Scotia Place, I'm going to have struggle not calling it the Scotia Bank Place, but the Scotia Place, is fantastic. The rendering of it, of course, it looks really good and kind of has a really nice, it does not have the saddle on top of it, but it does have that Calgary sort of feel with the flame cauldron, the Olympic cauldron, and kind of the yellowish blasty look. I almost want to say that they gave it to sort of that kind of that flame touch. I think that this was a big, I mean, we're going to talk about all the acquisitions off season here. I think that this is probably, I mean, you're not going to see the fruit of this for a few years, but this is the biggest acquisition of the Flames off season. Getting this to this point, getting the presentation of the politicians all together with shovels in the ground, I think is a big win for the city of Calgary, the Flames, and the hockey community in general. I think it's a good step.
Yeah, you can see at the top here, I have the rendering on my screen. You can see the flame-like structure at the top, which, you know what that tells me too? This team is not relocating anytime soon if you're building your rink to look like it has fire on it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting looking building. It, to me, is in very, very many ways sort of generic modern arena look, if that makes sense. The one thing I'm really kind of disappointed we're not seeing here, Kevin, is we're not seeing that iconic looking building. Like the Saddledome has defined the Calgary skyline since it was built. And I know we weren't going to get a new Saddledome. I know that wasn't going to happen, but I was hoping for something with a unique shape, with a unique look that could take the place of the Saddledome in the skyline as something very interesting and different.
Yeah. I guess for me, I guess where I'm coming from on that is, I think that part of this was the political battle that got to this point. Not that is, if this was an arena, would this have been, I think the wording around what this was going to be, an arena or an event center per se, and getting where you as a taxpayer was going to pay for. I think that idea of that iconic image was lost when that argument happened. Because you just can't get something that unique when you're kind of like trying to build all things for all people. And I think it's the taxpayer, for me, the taxpayer contributing to building conversations, I think is a bit more complex than a lot of people are letting this out to be. I know that a lot of people feel it's quite black and white, that no, that should not happen. I think it's a little bit more complex than that. And I think that that's where that the loss of that iconic image is out here. But I do think that you can create some interesting, I mean, watching online, the idea of calling this place the Cauldron, there's something that can be unique about it. I think that the other loss about this, and I think this is a loss in general for professionals, for sports in general, is I think teams need a home. Like the reason that you play at home is that you can create your team professionally built around what your arena looks like. So let's use a CFL example. The BC Lions are probably a little bit more of a high tempo offense because they play in the only outdoor arena stadium in Canada in the CFL. So it creates they have a different home field advantage than everybody else. In baseball, the Yankee Stadium, that right field porch, that right field bench is shorter than a lot of other places. So they create their team built around it. I think that we've lost that in general in hockey. And I do think from that perspective, I do understand where you're coming from. But I also think that you can create is there a possibility you can create a unique fan experience for the Flames? Yes.
And I think that's the thing to remember. And I have a rendering up here on the screen for those that are watching us on video. you'll see in this people outside. Like, this is part of what Calgary's called an arts and entertainment district. And you'll see in the renderings, if you dive into them, there's going to be restaurants on the main floor. There's going to be places to assemble on the main floor. The idea is, even if you don't have a ticket for the game, you will come to this district. I think this is going to be the new Red Mile in their vision. Like, you will come here to go to. Do you remember when the Flames had what was their restaurant downtown that they had? It was Flames Central when they took over the old Palace Theater.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to do something similar here, where they might have a Boston Pizza, or they might have Flames Central, or the idea is you will come to this building no matter, if you have a ticket or not. There's going to be hotels in the area. There's going to be, I think there's talk of a casino going in the area. Like, this is going to be more than a hockey rink on Stampede property. This is going to be a new district built around this. And we've seen that idea in Edmonton as well. And I think Calgarians have to remember that there's more to it than, that hockey rink. People will come in, let's say, for a concert and stay at the hotel there and that sort of thing. So I think it's an interesting vision. We'll see how it translates. What you're saying about, different buildings having different quirks, I think in some ways, though, getting rid of that, and that was never really the case in the NHL, right? The NHL has always been very regimented of what is the playing surface. And I think the NHL, unlike some of those other sports, doesn't matter about the rest of the building. The playing surface is really all that matters. I don't know we've ever had that weird quirk of, well, you're at home, you have a different, physical advantage than other teams in the NHL.
No, in the 80s, back in the 80s, you had the Boston Garden, the Coliseum in Quebec, and the Auditorium in Buffalo were smaller than every other rink. So they built that team around that. Yeah,
that's true. But I think hockey of all of them is the one that has the least of that. But I think more than anything, the advantage you get from your home rink is off the ice. It's all the facilities they have that we don't see for these players. It's all the stuff in the background, the weight rooms, the, training rooms, the food services they're offering. And I think those are the things that you're really, that your players are really getting. And we heard Uyghur, the first year he came to Calgary, talk about how it's not fun to play at the Saddledome. It doesn't have a lot of those modern amenities. This rink is going to have, there's going to be 2 rinks in this building, one for the Flames and one that's a community rink with 1,000 seats. That's also going to be where the Flames practice. And so I think even just having a separate practice area is going to be cool. And I think for kids of Calgary, minor hockey kids, you get to play at the same rink the Flames practice on. That's going to be really cool too.
Yeah. And that's where just back to that taxpayer conversation. I think we forget that this does have an impact on amateur sports, right? This does have an impact on your amateur sport community when you have things like this and you have an opportunity for Calgary minor hockey to play with the Flames. That's kind of a special little moment, right? So I don't think that should be lost in that at all. But you did say something else, and I think still a couple of questions still come out of this. And I talked on Twitter X about McMahon Stadium. Let's not forget the Wranglers and the Hitmen are going to be playing in the same rink as the Flames. Now,
so will the Roughnecks.
And the Roughnecks. Now, I kind of understand, like, the Roughneck, like, you're not going to, unless this field house concept comes in, the lacrosse is going to stay in the same building as the Flames, no matter what. Where do the CEBL Calgary team play?
They are at Winsport. They're using. So for those that don't know, Winsport is the old Olympic, where the Olympic ski jump was. They built a facility called Winsport, and they have some hockey rinks in there. That's where the Flames do their summer development camps. And the basketball team in the CEBL plays in one of the hockey rinks there that has about 5,000 seats.
Right. Okay.
The issue is there's no transit access, and it's hard to get to.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of, it's sort of trying to describe, like, if you're in Vancouver, it's trying to get from Richmond to Langley. It takes a long time.
It's a long time. It's not in the easiest place to get to. And again, there's not a lot of, the more stuff around it now, but you can't get there by transit easily. Like, it's not easy. Yeah. It's not an easy place for fans. And if you're going to be selling beer and, getting that profit, I think that you probably want to have transit access. You don't want to tell people you got to drive out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, and I think that is, just to build on that point, I think I kind of understand why the Wranglers are playing in an NHL rink. I mean, they're literally the next step to the NHL in terms of an NHL team and an AHL team. I think for me, the concern here is the Hitmen. And I mean, you're not going to toss them in a 1,000-seat community arena because they do get more than 1,000 fans a game. Right, they're not getting 10,000. Probably more accurate to say between 1,000 and 5,000, somewhere in there, depending on the night.
And those numbers have gone down since the Wranglers come to town too.
Right, exactly. But they do need. I think they need their own space. Right, they need their own. I think that's a fair and accurate thing to say.
Another, just while you're touched on the AHL team, so the Flames really like right now with the AHL team that they are in the same place because all the coaches share an office, and they think that's a great thing that they're speaking the same language, talking about the same players. Also, the AHL, like the NHL, has a lot of, it's not just you need a sheet of ice with some seats. There's a lot of things that you have to have for that team in the background, like training facilities and all that. And it makes sense from an economy of scale to have all that once. Why buy two big skate sharpeners? Let's use them together. Let's have all those spaces in one place. So I don't think the AHL team will ever be divorced space-wise from the NHL team in the city.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that should happen. I mean, that at all. But I do think that the Hitmen are getting sort of pinched in this, in the sense that I think that you should try to create an environment that the Hitmen can thrive in. And I don't know if they're currently. And I'll use the Vancouver
There have
Giants.
been some games in the last couple of years when the dome's been full with the Flames and the Wranglers. The Hitmen have played at the Seven Chiefs Sportsplex on the Tsuut'ina Nation, which has just over 3,000 seats.
Yeah. I mean, but again, is it easy to get to?
Not really.
Right. So, and that's where the Giants kind of come in. Like, this is an example, right? Where, it works, I guess, but I mean, it would be nice to improve the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's on that end. So, I mean, I guess the other part of all of this is still, I think you still need to build. There's two still things you need, and I'll go on my McMahon Stadium soapbox in a second, but you do need to fix Max Bell Arena, or you need to have a smaller type of arena that fills junior hockey at some point, right?
Yeah, I think if you look at any major city, there's generally two buildings. There's that one 18, 20,000 seat building, and then there's the 5,000 to 7,000 seat building, not just for hockey, but for, WWE wrestling, for monster trucks, for smaller concerts, for all these things that, you don't want to use a 20,000 seat building for, practices, for the away teams, all those things. I think right now in Calgary, we don't really have that. We talked about Winsport. Winsport's not great to get it. It's got great facilities, but it's not great to get in and out of. And it's so far away from the Saddle Dome, it's probably not practical for, say, the Flames to practice at. I think the ideal location is Max Bell. I don't think Max Bell is the building as it sits right now is the ideal venue for that. I think you almost need to knock down Max Bell and rebuild it.
Probably.
Remember, Max Bell's got 2 sheets of ice in there, right? So that building, as big as it looks, there's not a lot of room around each ice sheet.
Right. And the Circle K tournament does still have some games in that area, doesn't it?
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
And Max Bell, I don't know how many seats it is. Let me look it up, the big arena. But I could honestly see that tournament moving to Tsuut'ina Nation. And I've been to the Tsuut'ina Nation arena. It's really nice. The Big Four arena in there. It's really nice. There's like 8 dressing rooms. That's the kind of thing you could run a tournament like that fairly easily out of because there's 8 rooms. You got all those facilities, that sort of thing. It seats 2,121 for hockey with standing capacity of over 3,000. So smaller actually seating wise than Tsuut'ina Nation, but again, easier to get to. And there's a train stop right there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the other building, and we talk hockey here, but let's not forget the impact that the Stampeders and football still has an important part of the Calgary community, and it's an important part of Canadiana, and they still need to fix McMahon Stadium in some way, whether it's a new building or you just refurbish McMahon Stadium to actually make it look viable now. It's clear that that is the next thing or one of the next things that has to happen here. And I think one of the things that people would keep, I mentioned this in on Twitter X, and people were like, well, nobody cares. Like the dynos are not going to care. Nobody really cares. I just don't think that is necessarily the case. Like, first of all, I think it's easy to blame Flames ownership for this, for not fixing this building before. But I also think that the UFC deserves some answers to these questions as well, because they've owned this building. They have needed to fix this building. This isn't a new information here, Dan. The last Grey Cup, there was talk that they needed to fix this, and that was back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a longer conversation than this is new. And I mean, of course, people forget the botched Calgary Next proposal. There was a field house / stadium in that proposal that, of course, unfortunately, it didn't happen. So, yeah,
you have to remember, when we talk about McMahon, we have to remember it's owned by the UFC. The Flames can't just come in and wave a wand and start changing it. Yeah. It's owned by the UFC. And I think if you look at the UFC, as you would with any university, if I'm the president of the UFC and I say, hey, I'm taking money, for this, I think a lot of our donors and our students and our industry would question, well, why is that money not going to academia? And I think you would need to have a very separate marketing campaign for that. But also, I don't know, and you might have a better idea of this. So you spend millions to build a new one. Are you going to get the money back on that from the CFL alone? Like, is there, with the Flames, with the arena, you can't do outdoor concerts most of the year here in Calgary. You can't do a lot of stuff on that outside of the CFL. How long is it going to take to get your money back? And maybe that's why it hasn't been done.
Well, yeah, I think you're referring to the bylaws around concerts in that specific area.
Well, not even bylaws, but just like, are there, nothing else happens on that field anymore. My dad remembers going to concerts there as a kid, but like, if you're going to put millions in, how long is it going to take to get that back just on football revenue? Are there other things you could put there? Are there other events that would go in there that you'd make your money on? If it's going to take 30 years to get a payback from CFL games, no one's going to do it.
Is there, I guess, No, but I don't think you need to rebuild. I don't think you need a new stadium. I think if you could at least refurbish McMahon Stadium to something a bit more competent, I think you can survive with that.
There's so many music festivals now around Stampede time here in Calgary. I would be surprised if they couldn't rent it out for a music festival. It seems like a great venue for that, and having all the, the concession and all that. But as you're talking about with refurbishing, Kevin, it's going to take a year or more. Where do you put the team in the meantime? You want to know my proposal for that? Use the grandstand. Nothing happens to the grandstand except for 10 days a year when the Stampede's on. Play the Stampeders out of the grandstand. Send them on the road for 10 days.
Yeah, I mean, they've typically been on the road for Stampede anyway during that time. And I know that there's some people that have suggested that the grandstand might be a better option for the Stampeders than actual McMahon Stadium.
17,000 seats.
Yeah, closer to downtown.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you get into then, as the Flames are now, you've got to make a deal with the Stampede board, right? You don't get all the parking revenue. A lot of the same issues the Flames have now. But even if it was a temporary home, I've said that building, again, just like the football stadium, sits empty most of the year. No one's doing concerts. No one's doing, I think they do a haunted house on it in like October. Use that building.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, yeah.
And the other building that is right by McMahon, too, is the old Burn Stadium where the AAA Calgary Cannons played, and it's now used for community events and stuff. But if you really wanted to, I think that's also owned by the university. They could tie that into the football stadium to get some more, sort of auxiliary space. Maybe not seating, but more team facilities and whatnot.
Well, when they were refurbishing BC Place back before the Olympics, they moved the Lions to the old Empire Stadium. And they just kind of makeshifted that for those games. And then when BC Place was ready, they sent the Lions back. Yeah, so I think that there's a way to do it. I think that the one problem that you're going to have is, the difference between Vancouver and Calgary in the fall/winter. The weather is much warmer out here. I mean, it rains, which sucks. but you're not going to have minus. I don't think you're going to have people sitting in auxiliary minus 20 in October to watch a football game per se, right? So.
Yeah. I just, if you're going to move them somewhere, you got to have a place to move them. And that's another thing we don't have.
Yeah. Fair enough.
It's not even like you can move them to Airdrie for a year. Like, they don't have the facility either.
No.
And I think that's another part of this Calgary building conversation, whether it's football, hockey. I mean, that secondary building could be Airdrie, could be Okotoks, could be somewhere like that. But none of these auxiliary communities have the facilities. And maybe that's when one of the governments needs to look at. Maybe Okotoks or, Cochrane needs to look at that.
Yeah. I mean, there's talk of a building being built here. Here, I use Vancouver as an example just to make this. There's talk of some type of building going up in Surrey. I think the number I heard was ridiculous, like a 70,000. I don't think that they're going to come up with something like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do come up with their own sort of building / event center that seats probably around the 18 to 20,000 that the Calgary Event Center has, right? Because Surrey is the fastest growing city in Metro Vancouver, right? So you could see something like that happening in Surrey, but
Yeah, and I mean in Calgary here, I mean for those, I imagine most people listening are from Calgary. I mean, we see the Balzac developments, right? The New Horizon Mall and the Cross Iron Mills, and there's a lot of space out there. Not that people want to be driving out there midweek. I think that's part of the reason the Coyotes didn't, function well, because their arena wasn't in town. But that could be an option as well.
Yeah. But I think the ultimate conclusion is a good step. More steps need to happen.
Yeah,
I think ultimately where we're at. The other thing that I do want to there was a lot of on ice news, but I think the other thing is that happened that I think saddened a lot of Flames fans is the loss of Rick Ball on Flames TV broadcasts. Of course, he covered the team for at least almost 10 years. He was with this team as the TV voice of the Flames. Now, and I think now, like if you do the Mount Rushmore of Flames voices, Dan,
2014 he joined the Flames full time, so 10 years.
Yeah. So as far as the Mount Rushmore of Flames voices, I mean, I have Peter Marr. I think you have to have him on there as the original play-by-play radio voice of the Flames. Ed Whalen, I think you have to have as the original TV voice. And I would throw in Beasley because of the iconic home call. I
agree.
And I think Rick Ball has to be in that conversation on the Mount Rushmore, just for length, the relationship he had with the fans. I think he's been loved by the fans over the years, and I think that this is it's a sad. I'm happy for him that he's going to get an opportunity. I think to do more than Chicago Blackhawk games. I think I would not be surprised if we see him on national broadcasts for somebody as well. But it is a loss for Calgary. I think not having Rick Ball.
Yeah, it is for sure. I think he's become definitely an icon here. And I think, like any great announcer, it's partly the team too. And Rick's definitely great, but I think Rick and Kelly Rudy have worked so well together as a team. It's sort of like in wrestling, you can credit JR so much, but you got to credit the King as well. They're a great team together. I think it's great that Kelly Rudy, it looks like, will be staying on so he can help that transition with somebody new. Sort of like we saw when Derek Wills joined the Flames and still had a seasoned broadcaster like Peter Labardius to go with him. I think Kelly Rudy is going to be great there. I'll be curious to see who they replace Rick with. And as I said on our show back when Peter Marr retired, don't compare the new guy to Rick. Don't compare the new guy to Peter, I said. Don't look at, Derek Wills as being Peter Marr too. Give him a chance to be different and establish his own identity. And same thing here. Don't say after one game, well, this guy's not Rick Ball. No, he's not. But he's different, and let him be different.
Yeah, let him establish his own identity there for sure. So, yeah, that is.
What do you think the likelihood is that Labardius takes that role?
I don't want to get into too deep of a speculation. The name that I think some people have brought up is Hunter Ryan Singh, that he moves. He is from Calgary. There's a lot of, I mean, I guess you can, if you move Singh down over to Calgary, Jack Michaels would get more work on the regional in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
That might be what happens, but I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to see, wait and see.
Yeah. And I could also see them doing sort of a two-man booth in that way, where maybe you've got, Singh doing some of the games, or, some of the maybe, not big broadcasts, and you have a more experienced broadcaster doing some of those big Hockey Night in Canada games. I just don't know that Singh's ready for an 82 game schedule yet.
Yeah, it depends on how that would go.
It's sort of like with the Flames when Cassie Campbell does Kelly Rudy's Hockey Night assignments, right? You could sort of have different people for different nights.
Yeah, that's a possibility too, right? So
it'll be interesting to see what happens, but good for Rick Ball for moving on. And, voices of teams change all the time. It's what happens within the league. And I think Calgary's fortunate that we've had great broadcasters for so long. We'll see who the next guy is. And I think whoever it is, they're coming. It's almost, in some ways, when you mention Hunter Ryan Singh, I'm thinking it's almost interesting because you bring in a young guy to build with the team, just like they're doing on the ice, right? This could be a time to bring in a younger broadcaster that can grow with this team as well.
Yep, that's a possibility for sure.
Time to rebuild in the booth.
Rebuild on the ice, rebuild in the booth.
That's right.
Speaking of rebuild, or whatever we've called it, let's get to the on ice. And let's start back at the draft. We're not going to go through the whole draft, but especially the first round, which I think history is going to look back on this one. This is one of those drafts in the first round for a couple of different reasons that people are going to look back on and kind of redraft. There'll be a few conversations about how to redraft. I think, first of all, just from a macro picture, the surprise that the Anaheim Ducks took Barrett Seneke third, I think, is going to be interesting. The fact that the Utah Jazz, or I call them the Utah Jazz, the Utah Hockey Club. The Utah Hockey Club took Tisha Ginla as their first pick. Now, was there a sense of relief from you that Utah did that?
We were broadcasting live that night at Bow River Brewing here in Calgary, and you could tell in the room there was some shock. I think, as much as we've had the discussion, you and I and me and my co-host Matt, about would Tej fall to us, I think there was still some shock that, wow, it's done. I think in some ways there's a sense of relief, but there's also holding your breath of, okay, who do they take instead? And that was the way I felt at the time. It's like, okay, Tej is off the board, so who are they taking? And I think that was sort of the second shoe that had to drop.
And I think that this is the other thing that I think everybody is going to be talking a little bit about, right? Is sort of what happened in that stage of all these of the draft, because you had ultimately going, am I in the right page here? No. But you had the Ottawa Senators took Carter, the hitman Carter Yaremchuk. Sorry if I mispronounced that name there. Give me a second here while I get myself.
Carter Yakimchuk from the Hitmen went to Ottawa at 7, and then Berkeley Catton went at 8.
And then Berkeley Catton was a guy that a lot of Flames fans wanted the Flames to take. But so that happened. And then, but what happened here, I think, is also interesting, is starting with Zayne Pareikh, and we got a number of defensemen in a row and picked. And I think that that's going to be one of the fascinating things of this draft is there was Pareikh from, and then Soliov.
Zayne doesn't look too happy to be signed by the Flames, does he?
No, I don't know. I thought he was.
I think he's great, but just this picture of him, I laugh when I show this picture that I have on screen now. He just looks unhappy to be a Flame.
I just thought that was his face, to be honest with you.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
And when we were broadcasting live, Pareikh was celebrated. Like, people were cheering. I think Flames fans were really happy with this pick.
Yeah, so it was 4 defensemen in a row that went. It was Pareikh that went to the Flames, Soliov that went to New Jersey, And Sam Dickinson went to the Sharks, and Zeev Bulliam went to the Minnesota Wild. So I think but I'm watching Pareikh's tape. He definitely has the offensive game figured out. I think we can.
And he's admitted that he needs more work on his defensive game.
Yeah. I like the way he talks. I like the way he skates. I like his offensive ability. And I like the fact that he's able to acknowledge where he needs to work on. And I'm really excited to see what he can bring.
I am too. And I think you and I talked about it. We talked about it on our show. I think that the Flames needed a defenseman. If you look at their system, that's where they're really lacking. I mean, they've got some upcoming forwards with guys like Peltier, guys like Coronado. There's really no defenseman in the system that is that, high-end prospect. I think they need a defenseman here. I really do. And I think that this is going to be a great pick for the Flames. And I've seen so many Flames fans excited about Pareikh and almost excited about rebuilding for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly brings a dynamic to the team that they don't really have at this point. And I mean, you got Pareikh, you got Markstrom, which you got from Vancouver as part of the Elias Lindholm trade. So you definitely feel like you got some offensive upside on the right side. And then on the left side, it feels like you've got a more of a defensive style, but we'll get into the left side because there's a few things that happened and didn't happen on the left side that is fascinating. So I think that was a good sign. That's good. And I think that the argument will be, I think you look at this, I think everybody picked what they thought was the best fit for their style. I think New Jersey wanted a bit more size. I think San Jose wanted a bit more skating with Malcolm Celebrini. And I think, the Wild wanted someone that kind of got the final pickings of any of those other three teams, right? So,
and I think, in the one warning I gave our fans, and I'll give your listeners as well, don't expect Pareikh to be on the roster this year. Like, this is a pick, especially in a rebuild year, where the Flames are going to, I think, take their time with this guy. And, you'll see him finish off his OHL career. You might even see him get some time with the Wranglers. Like, don't expect Pareikh to be in the lineup immediately. Expect this to be, as the Flames rebuild, a guy who, it'll take some time to get him to where he needs to be, and that's okay. But, just because he's not in right away, don't think, oh, well, he's not going to make it. I think they're going to take their time with both him and Matvei Gridin, who they took 28. I think they're both going to be, 3-4 year projects for the Flames.
Yeah, so let's get to before we get to Gridin in a second here. I think with Pareikh, I think some people have tossed this idea out, and we'll see where you're at. If he has a good camp, do you give him 9 games in the NHL?
That's tough to say. I mean, the Flames have really 4 or 3, to me, NHL defensemen right now in Uyghur, Ball, and Anderson. You've got Miramanov, Bean, and Pakal. So I guess the question would be where, and is he benefiting from it? If you're going to put him on a second or third pair, maybe. I don't know if there's benefit to doing that this year.
I actually don't think there is. I think I would send him back to junior and get this kid get him confident.
I agree. Like, unless you're going to put him on a pair with Uyghur, which you're not going to do, I don't think, or Anderson, I don't know if it's worth it. If you're putting him on a third pair with Jake Bean, I think there's more learning to be done in the OHL.
Yeah, you would rather do that than put him with someone like that.
And I think sometimes we forget, too, that, being in the NHL and trying to defend against, and it would depend on the 9 games they pick, I guess the first 9, it can screw up your confidence if you're not able to defend, say, a Connor McDavid or somebody slips by you or whatever. Like, I think there's more danger to that with defensemen in a way than there is with forwards.
Yeah. I would keep him around as long as camp as possible, but I would send him back to the OHL.
I agree.
Get him in that confidence. Now, Matvei Gridin was the 28th pick. He is the pick, of course, from. He's the final piece of the Elias Lindholm, or almost one of the final pieces in the Elias Lindholm trade that happened when Lindholm went to Vancouver. Now, Gridin is actually going to be in the CHL because he was the first pick in the international draft. And who did he end up with? Hang on a second here. Good
Played for
research.
the Muskegon Lumberjacks last year.
Yeah, so he's going to be with Valid in the QHL with Valdior, pardon me. So that, and he was the first pick in the CHL import draft. So he's going to get some junior hockey. This is a guy that kind of reminds me a little bit about the project that Samuel Honzek is with the Flames. He's got some work to do. Now, I think the difference here is, and you guys talked about this on your show, I think that there was a legitimate argument that you could have went a whole bunch of different ways in that first round, even early second round, that you probably could have came up with someone. And the Flames actually did not do too bad in the early second round with Andrew Basha, pardon me, that they picked up there too. I think that guy has some good potential. But
I agree.
I think,
I think Gradin is a player that will be a professional. Do I think he's going to be a first-line forward? No. This is a guy I think that, again, you'll move slowly with. I think he will get a couple years in the AHL. I think he will, I think he will probably make the Flames team, maybe as a third-line guy, for a good portion of his career. And you need those guys. You need guys to play all through the lineup. Not everyone can be a first-liner. But I think this is a guy that he's either going to make it, and he'll make the NHL, or he's not. And he's definitely got some stuff to work on.
He kind of reminds me of a little bit. Just hear me out. Just a little bit. This is reminds me of Andre Mangiapane. And
I was actually about to say that, yeah.
Because he's a guy that, I think Mangiapane has a lot of good traits. He has a lot of things that I think he has the ability to score in the NHL. I just don't think he is a consistent. I think that 35 goal year was a little bit of an aberration. He's more high. And I think
Mangiapane is a guy that a lot of people always had high hopes for. Him and Dylan Dubé. I know my co-host Matt always thought those guys were going to be, top six, and I don't think they've shown to be that way. But when they want to be, they can play in that style. But like you said, it's not consistent.
Yeah.
Let's just say I think that Gradin will be a guy who's a professional, whether it's in the NHL or the AHL. I think he can do it. It's just a matter of how high he's able to go.
Yeah. It's
this guy could be the next Brett Sutter, where he's a career AHLer for this organization.
Yeah. But you still need. Sometimes I think we overrate the draft, and it's like, oh, if we have all of these picks, we've got chances of building a team. Even if a lot of picks, you still have to be thoughtful about your process and what you're building, right? And you're not gonna, you obviously not everybody is going to make it, but you have to have some little bit of thought around how you're building this team, right? So, and I think Gradin is a guy that, no, I don't think anybody is projecting top six, but if he can contribute 10 or 20 goals for a few years, I don't think that hurts per se.
No. And I think when you look at a lineup, you've got to look at, it's not just the first. Take a look at the Flames lineup, right? We had Mangiapane, who is a 5th round pick. We now have Pospisil, who's a 4th round pick. Johnny Gaudreau is a 4th round pick. Dustin Wolf, a 7th round pick. You're going to get guys from the middle rounds who do better, and you're going to get guys from the top rounds who do worse. To me, you've just kind of look at it as, maybe Gradin doesn't make it as far as you expect for a first rounder, but maybe a guy from the 3rd round really impresses. And then to me, it all evens out for that draft year. You got to look at the draft year as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how I've been looking at it too, right? And when you draft, what is the entire list going to look like, right? I think one of the things I'll give San Jose credit for is that they didn't go, we've got Maxim Celebrini, we thank you, we're heading out now to hang out around Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays with Vegas. They also kind of drafted pretty well after that with that Sam. I think the Sam Dickinson pick is a good pick for them, again. So it sounds like that's.
But remember, these teams have to ice 2 rosters, one at the NHL level, one at the AHL level, and we sometimes don't give it enough credit, but you can make a decent living playing American League hockey for, 5-6 years. If these guys can play professional hockey, even if they don't become a Flame, I think that's still a success for that pick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite. Yeah, I mean, it's a crapshoot. I think this involves a lot more of the player's commitment too, and sometimes maybe the player doesn't commit as much as we want them to, and sometimes it takes a while for players to develop too.
Sometimes it's injuries. There's a lot of things that can go on.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing this year is going to be some of the depth picks for the Flames, like Luke Misa, Hunter Lang, their 5th and 6th round pick. I think there's some interesting pieces there, and it's going to be, over the long term, how do they develop?
Yeah, and the Flames have done really well picking late.
They have.
Like that's been one of their strengths, right? So, and I know that a lot of people, I think there's still a lot of fans that are angry about the the pick a couple of years ago that they picked Tony over Lane Hudson, and I get that, and unfortunately, teams do make mistakes. I mean, the Oilers took Xavier Bourgeau over Wyatt Johnson as an example, right? So
and teams even make the mistake first overall, right? I mean, we've seen guys like Patrick Stefan, right? Number 1 pick, never really amounted to much, and whether that's injuries or what, but there's no surefire pick in the NHL draft.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And that's why you get 7 of them. And the more picks you have, the more likely there are that 1 or 2 of them become something.
Yeah,
it's playing the odds.
Yeah. Speaking of Mangiapane in the draft, and I forgot about this when I was putting this together, but Andre Mangiapane did go to Washington for a 2nd round pick in 2025. I was surprised that they got a 2nd round pick for Andre Mangiapane. And it's no disrespect to Mangiapane. I was sort of thinking he's in the 3rd, 4th round level, not 2nd. So I think the Flames came out of this looking really good.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be, like you said, a cap dump where it'd be, hey, if you take this player for us, we will give you, a 5th round pick, or we'll take a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick just to get it off the books. And I even thought the Flames might have to throw something in, like Mangiapane in a 4th for something to get someone to take it. So if you're Mangiapane, you got to be happy, because to me, that tells me the Capitals really want me on their roster. They're not taking me, to do the Flames a favor or something. It's way more than I expect the Flames to get. There's no salary retention, which I also thought there might have to be, is a year of salary retention on that. So I think, for what it is, good for the Flames to move that piece on. I think we all know it needed to happen, and to get value for it.
Yep.
And whether they make that 2nd round pick or they trade that 2nd round pick, a 2nd round pick has value.
Yep, it does, for sure. Yep.
And I think a team like the Capitals, who likely will not be a playoff contender, it will have more value.
Yes. I'm really not sure what they're doing in Washington, but anyway,
it's not like it's going to be the last pick in the 2nd round. Like that's very feasibly a top 15 pick in that round, and could have value because of that.
Yeah.
And we've seen a number of times. I mean, the Flames have a couple seconds. Maybe you bundle a couple seconds, move in a late 1st, or you move one of those for another player. I think there's still some needs on the Flames roster. Like, I think we'll see what happens there, but it can only go up from here. Even if the Flames make the pick, whoever you get, you've got that chance of getting another NHLer during your rebuild. I think there's no downside to this for the Flames, and good for them for getting out of that deal.
Yeah. I'll toss a scenario at you in a second here, just to tease something here. But I also think that, like, during this year, there's going to be a new weakness that will reveal itself as part of this restoring project that I think that you'll need that draft pick for. But let's get the free agency, and I'm going to talk about what I think the best thing that the Flames did. It was what they didn't do. They didn't sign Jake DeBrusk to a 7-year contract. And I'm not saying that was bad for Vancouver, but Calgary did not need to sign Jake DeBrusk to a 7-year contract. They also didn't need to sign Anthony Duclair to a 4-year contract, which the Islanders did. I think avoiding that, was probably the best thing that the Flames ended up doing during the free agency.
But I mean, Conroy went in and said he's not doing those 7-year deals. So I knew that he wasn't going to do that right off the bat. You don't want guys, and he said that in his media availabilities. We don't need 7-year deals right now. So I agree. You don't want to sign those. You need guys that are willing to be here for 2-3 years. And we'll talk about the Mantha deal. I think it's perfect for that reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. You don't need to be spending money now. And There's two arguments to this. With the cap going up a little bit, if you can sign a guy at 7-year deal now at this price, you could get a better deal as the cap goes up and contracts go up, but you don't know what you need right now. And, every rebuild, you got to have guys from within your system. You can't bring in those big names always from outside. Also, if I'm DeBrusk, why do I want to come to Calgary? I never understood that. If I was DeBrusk, why do I want to come to a team that's rebuilding right now when I probably could go to a team that's not? I don't think that was ever a fit for the player for that reason.
Yeah, I think probably of the two, the closer one that made a little bit more sense was the Anthony Duclair idea because he played with Jonathan Huberdeau before. But ultimately, you're not paying 4 years for him or 7 years for not even getting involved. I think my point is it didn't smell like the Flames were in on DeBrusk. I think that was just more of a speculation thing from the internet than an actual. I mean, I'm sure they talked to Jake DeBrusk, but I'm not sure that got any further than, "Hey, Jake, how are you? This is Calgary. I see you're going elsewhere. Good luck."
Yeah, and again, even if I'm Anthony Duclair, and we haven't had this discussion on our show, but I've talked to a number of Flames fans. Why do I want to come to Calgary? So, okay, I had some success with Huberdeau once. It's not the same Jonathan Huberdeau I'm coming to play with here. I mean, this guy has looked terrible the last couple of years. So what's to say that spark's going to be reignited? And I don't want to sign on long-term and go, "Oh, crap, we can't get that back." I think if you're going to do the Duclair thing, you need to convince him 1 year. Let's try it out again and see if it works. And if it does, we'll back the Brinks truck up. But I don't think that's what he wants right now with the Flames rebuilding.
Well, here, I'm glad you brought this up because I think and that's is why I kind of like that. I like the Mantha signing, but this is the other thing that I'm really thinking about, Dan. Behind that wry Craig Conroy smile, I think there's some absolute frustration with how this Matthew Tkachuk trade has turned out on the Jonathan Huberdeau side. This is not Mackenzie Weegar's fault. We've talked about this. This should be Tkachuk for Weegar. And Huberdeau.
I keep trying to reframe that. Don't look at this as Tkachuk for Huberdeau. I think Weegar was at some point, looked at as a lot of people as a throw-in. He's become the better Flame. Let's call it Tkachuk for Weegar and Huberdeau.
Yeah. But here you have the Florida Panthers raising the Stanley Cup, on that June night. I think behind that wry smile, Dan, I think that there's a lot more frustration within that organization for the Jonathan Huberdeau camp. And I think that this year is a somewhat important year for Jonathan Huberdeau. I'm not saying that they're expecting 100 points for Jonathan Huberdeau, but I do think closer to a point per game, consistent year from Jonathan Huberdeau is something that I think that they want. I think that this Anthony Mantha signing, I mean, the idea is to get Huberdeau going. I think that this might be this feels like the last straw in some ways. And I know it's going to be a hard trade to make, but maybe, you talk about sweeteners that you may want to add. Maybe that second round 2025 pick goes in with a Jonathan Huberdeau to be sent elsewhere.
Right now, I don't think anyone's wanting to take on that deal.
No, not right at this point. I mean, I think you'll have to add some sweeteners, but I think the Flames.
And the other thing, without the Huberdeau deal, you're below the cap floor. So if you're going to send it out, you're going to have to take some money back.
Yeah, but I do think the Flames' patience is wearing thin with Huberdeau, is where my point is.
I think it is, but at the same time, I don't know if it is in a rebuild. I think if we were going for to be a competitive team, I definitely think that it's wearing thin because of that. Because he's not doing what they brought him in to do and how much he's making in a rebuild scenario. I think you can give this guy a lot longer leash. Even if you're playing him on a third line and he's, say, making somebody else look better. I mean, we saw some, him and Kuzmenko looking good. Maybe you're putting someone like Zary in the middle there. I think for a couple of years, you've got some leash on this guy now.
Yeah, I guess yes and no, but I see what you're saying. But also at some point, you're paying the guy $10 million, Dan.
Yeah,
like this is the richest contract in Flames history.
But you've also got $20 million to spend. Like it's not like his $10 million is restricting you from doing anything right now.
In a couple of years, if there's a Flame that is, I think the way the forward group is right now, you're right. There's no one pushing for Huberdeau's spot, so I guess you're kind of okay with it. But I think when it gets to the point that there's a forward on that left side that deserves that shot at what Huberdeau is doing. I think
the move will happen eventually, but why now? Why pay somebody to get rid of that deal now?
I don't think it's going to happen now. I think that this year this year Jonathan Huberdeau is not going anywhere. But I do think that the Flames are getting. I think the Flames are a little bit more tired of this Huberdeau situation than. Yeah, it's fine that this is a rebuild. I think that there's some internal frustration of how that. Like
and even if you want to buy it out, the longer you wait, the less it costs.
Yeah, that's fair. But I do think that this trade put egg on the Flames organization.
I think it did, but I think it's, in some ways we can say it's the last guy, right? It's not Connie's problem, it was the last guy.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at it too, and I'm not trying to give Treliving a pass, we have to look at it in context. Johnny just walked away for nothing, right? Matthew had a no trade clause. There's only certain teams you could talk to. At the time, Jonathan Huberdeau looked like a great acquisition coming off a 100+ point career or a 100-point career season. We didn't know he was going to, whatever's happened was going to happen. At the time, this looked on paper like the right move. Show me a GM that hasn't had a terrible move.
No. I'm not attacking Treliving or anything. The problem with this trade isn't, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The problem with this trade isn't Uyghur. The problem with this trade isn't even Cole Schwindt. And the problem with this trade isn't Treliving. The problem with this trade is I blame this is squarely on Jonathan Huberdeau and his performance. This is,
I think if Huberdeau needs time to rebuild whatever's wrong, doing it on a rebuilding roster makes sense. I mean, this guy doesn't have to be your first line left winger, even if he drops down to the third line, which we saw at some points last year. I think you've got time to let Jonathan Huberdeau find Jonathan Huberdeau.
Yeah. But I think they're hoping that he finds that quicker than.
And, I could see him becoming almost what Michael Backlund has been here, where he's a great secondary piece. Yes, he's being paid like he should be the first piece, but I think you might say, whatever's happened has happened. We don't know what it is. Jonathan Huberdeau has become a great secondary piece for this team who can make other guys look better.
Yeah.
He could become the highest paid third liner in the league.
Interesting. I guess. So the other thing that the free agents that they brought in included Anthony Mantha, which was a nice signing. They brought in Jake Bean, which let's clarify this, because was it you that posted this tweet or Matt? I'm not sure who did. Everyone wanted T. Ginla.
This is me on behalf of Fireside Chat.
Okay, and I did actually agree with you. First of all, John Bean's not with the organization anymore. So
for those that don't know, Jake Bean's father, John Bean, was the Flames CEO.
Yeah, and Jake joined the team as a free agent. I think that this is one of those things that I think for the player, this is exactly what he needs. This is an opportunity for redemption.
Yeah, he's a Calgary. Just to clarify that tweet you're talking about. So there's a lot of people online that were saying, "Oh, this is nepotism. The Flames are hiring Jake Bean because his dad, is CEO or was CEO." And the tweet that Kevin was talking about was me saying, "Hey, everybody want to teach Ginla here. Jerome works for the organization too. Why are we okay with bringing in, a high-level person's son in that case, but not in this case?" It just seemed very hypocritical to me for those that are making those arguments.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But for Jake, I think it's ultimately, this is an opportunity to redeem his career. Is he a top 4 defenseman? No. Is he a top 6? I think he has a chance to be a 6-7 guy on this team, can provide some good power play minutes. I've always kind of liked Jake Bean, but he just hasn't quite clicked for whatever reason.
First round pick, former Hitman, Calgary boy. I think playing at home is going to help him. And you know what? I think he is. I mean, he's become a 5-6 guy in the league. So why not have him play here? He's cheap. He's at home. Why not?
Yeah.
I think as much as you said he's not a top 4, if we look at the current defense pairs, I think Daniel Maramanov plays in the top 4. I don't think he's a top 4 either. But I think if Maramanov has an injury, I think Jake Bean will be given a chance to show what he can do there.
Yeah, I think it'll be competition between him and Kevin Ball in terms of for that left side, which right now looks like to me it's Anderson, Uyghur, Miramonov, Ball, and then your law firms of Bean, Pascal, and Gang.
Yeah. And, I think too, Bean was drafted by Carolina, and he's had some time playing with both the Hurricanes and the Checkers. The Hurricanes have a very deep defense. I don't know he ever got the shake he should have there. And then he went to Columbus, who's been sort of up and down. Even last year they were down. He played 72 games there. I think there's still more to this guy that could be unlocked if he's used correctly.
Yep, I agree. The other signing was Devin Cooley, of course, in terms of goals. So you've got a guy that can be your tweener. And I think it's what's really been interesting here.
And that's a 2-year deal for Cooley.
Yeah. What's interesting for this one, too, is Conroy has not given Dustin Wolf this job. Nope. He's still maybe publicly they have, privately they might be saying, yeah, Wolf, you're number one, but they have not said that publicly. And I think that's really interesting.
I don't. I mean, you and I have talked about it. We don't know what Dan Vladar is yet. I think there could be more to Dan Vladar. We don't know that. I think if you give a young kid and you say, all right, kid, you've got it. I think you're putting a lot of pressure on that kid. I think you're, giving him ego. We had some times last season that Dustin Wolf did not look great. I don't think we can say, okay, this kid's going to play 50 games. I think you're saying you will get NHL games next year. And I think with any young goalie, you have to manage those, especially on a rebuilding team. We don't need him to play 40 games, right? It doesn't really matter how many starts he gets. I think you've got to get him enough to keep him going.
Yes, that's why I think that I think that the fan base.
And I don't know if the Flames will have a starter. I could very much see this being an A-B scenario.
I could see this being an ABC scenario. I think that Cooley is going to get some NHL games.
And I think the nice thing about Cooley, too, is we still don't know. I mean, Vladar left with career-ending surgery last year. We don't know if he's ready. We don't know how ready he is. And I think that's why you bring in a guy like Cooley or, previously Dansk or somebody like that who has some NHL experience. And they can swap in and sub in fairly easily.
Yeah. I think that why this is interesting to me is I think there's a lot of people that have come to this conclusion that there's nothing for Dustin Wolf to do in the AHL anymore. And that may be true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's quite ready for the NHL. And I think that a lot of people are rushing. I think a lot of fans want the Flames to rush him. And I think why that's interesting to me is the Flames are not. What's telling me is they're not going to rush anybody.
Nope.
They're just.
Even if we have a year where Dustin Wolf gets 30 starts and few of those are wins, that's okay for where the Flames are, right? It's about managing him. And I think you've got to tell Dustin Wolf, if you're the goalie coaches, you let us know when you've had enough. We'll put the other guy in. And, we're not, a lot of times we hear goalie coaches or head coaches say, I asked the starter, do you want to start tonight? I don't think you're asking Dustin Wolf. I think you're telling Dustin Wolf when he's in that net.
Yeah. Yeah. And make this a competitive environment for players to try to get into this lineup, right?
Yeah, because and I think who knows what's going on with Vladar, but you're right. I think Cooley will get some starts. I could even see a scenario where it becomes Wolf Cooley.
Yeah, possibly. The other signing was Ryan Lomberg returning to the Flames after a few years with the Florida Panthers. He grabbed the Stanley Cup ring with the Florida Panthers. I always thought when Ryan Lomberg was here, he was going to be a popular player. I think it was unfortunate that he ended up leaving. I'm glad he's back. And I think he's kind of in a position where he's similar to Kadri. He's got his cup. He's going to, play his career out here or play some games here. I think he'll add some much needed energy and, add much, and a bit of grit and toughness and a bit of edge to this team, which I think to be honest with you, I think they lacked a lot of last year. I thought that they were pushed around a lot. And I think with Lomberg, I don't think they get pushed around too much.
No, I agree with you. It's a little more than I'd like to spend for a guy in that role. But again, the Flames have got all the money in the world, so why not? Pretty much 2 years, $2 million a year. Ryan Lomberg got a ring, and I think if nothing else, you want those guys in the dressing room that can say to the young guys, hey, I got a ring. Here's how we do it. Here's, what you need to know and be that leader. And I think that's what they're bringing Lomberg in to be, is that leader, like you said, some toughness, a fan favorite most of the time. Those tough guys. I mean, I think back to McGrattan. I think back to Tim Hunter. That role here in town has usually been a fan favorite, and I think Lomberg will be that as well. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. I mean, he's 29 if he spends most of the rest of his career in Calgary.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. So you got Bean, you got Ryan Lomberg, you got Anthony Mantha. And then
as much as I didn't want to see AJ Greer leave, I think Ryan Lomberg I'd actually rather have than Greer.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lomberg's health, I think it puts that to an advantage over AJ Greer. I do like AJ Greer, but the other one that was signed is a guy that you'll see. He's playing in Calgary no matter what. He'll have his skate sharpened in the same dressing room no matter what. But I think Martin Ferk will be playing a little bit of Flames games. You'll probably have to see him with some Wranglers games. He replaces Michael Stone as terms of a guy that has a wild shot that you have no idea what's going to happen with it, but it's going to get somewhere towards the net. That's what Martin Ferk is going to bring. He's the new Michael Stone.
Yeah, he's a forward, but yeah, I know what you're saying. And this is a guy who's had some NHL time. I mean, he's 30. He's played for the Canes, the Wings, the Kings, and played a lot of time in the AHL, played in the Swiss League the last couple of years. I think this is and when I look at the guys in the roster, you're not going to take away a spot for a young guy to put a 30-year-old in. I think this is maybe not your AHL guy. I don't know if he'd clear waivers in all cases, but I think this is your 13th forward.
Yep.
And I'd rather have an older guy be that 13th forward than take a young guy and not have him play.
Right. And I think this is a guy that has shown the capability of scoring goals, right? So you can get some bottom six production. You could probably toss him a little bit with Backlund and Coleman every once in a while. You can,
and I mean, if we look at his AHL numbers, I mean, 2022-23 with Springfield, 64 points, 2021-22 with the Ontario Reigns, 73 points. Like, this could be, you're right, if they can get him through waivers, this could be your top guy in the American League who's that first call up when you need him. But yeah, I don't think this is a guy who will be an everyday Calgary Flames player.
Yeah, no.
But again, good to have veterans around, right? Whether at the AHL level, the NHL level. I think with Sutter, the Flames, the Wranglers captain retiring, I could see this guy wearing the new C for the Wranglers.
Yeah. I know we did want to mention that Brett Sutter is retiring and going on to coaching, and this will be the first year in 28 that there's not been a Sutter in the Flames organization.
Well, there is. Brett's there.
Oh, Brett's still there. Okay, so that the streak.
I think it's 28 years in a row the Flames have employed a Sutter.
Yes, okay. I thought Pareikh, maybe I misread Pike's tweet there, but yeah, that was okay.
Yeah, one of the brothers has been. I mean, we've had Ron as player development head for a while. They've had them in scouting. I think for 28 years in a row, the Flames have had a Sutter in some way employed by the hockey ops team.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess the other news that is interesting in terms of the acquisitions and non-acquisitions.
Can we just talk a little bit about Anthony Mantha here before we move on?
I did. Okay, but sorry.
I like this signing. Anthony Mantha on a 1 year. And this is a guy who I think we can all say probably didn't have the best season last year. And I love that the Flames targeted him or he targeted the Flames, who knows, but that we're doing that kind of show me deal. And I think that's exactly what Mantha needs, is a good NHL player, right? He knows the league. He's 29. 2023-24, he got 34 points with the Capitals. I think this is a great 1 year deal. I don't want anyone to go out and buy a Mantha jersey because I don't think he'll be here after this year, but I love the Flames are trying to find this type of player. And this is a guy who, sort of like we were talking about with Huberdeau, I think you could put him with Huberdeau. I think you could put him with Sharon Govich. Like, I think there's a lot of possibility for this guy in the lineup, and I'm really happy with this deal. I think it was good money on a 1 year. You've got to be finding those sort of show me deals and taking advantage of those players that need that.
And this is a guy that you could trade at the trade deadline to get a couple of picks, right? Yep. That's what the Golden Knights did. They acquired him from Washington for a couple of draft picks. That's another guy. A playoff team, a team needs some scoring. They may call you on an Anthony Mantha and you can get a pick.
And even if Mantha and Conroy talked and he said, "Hey, I want to be here for 3 more," I'd be okay with that at a similar money. Like, again, the Flames have tons of money to play with. If he said, "Hey, I'm really enjoying it here. I'm having a productive year. Let's do 2 or 3 more of these," I'd be okay with that too. But you're right, Mantha could be a great trade chip down the road.
Yeah. 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 So I would good. You had that. Good. We had that discussion, and you could play him with Huberdeau, maybe play him with Kadri a little bit. You could probably play him with Zari. Maybe even let's not forget the extension that the Flames signed Igor Sharangovich with 5 years, 28.5 a year. I think people were a little perplexed when he didn't really answer the question of whether or not he wanted to be here in the end of season press conference. That was more of an English thing than a.
That's what I was thinking too. I think it's more of an English thing.
Yeah,
it's also the pressure. I mean, you can speak English, but when you're getting questions thrown at you like that, it's even harder to comprehend them if it's your second language.
Yeah. I think while you can play Mantha with a lot of these guys, I think you need to use Mantha. You need to use Kuzmenko. You need to use these veterans to help you build young players. And I think a great line for the Flames would be Zari, Sharangovich, Mantha. Yeah, I can see that. Now, who's your center?
I think Sharangovich would probably, with the lineup the way it's built, you're short on centers. I think Sharangovich would be your center.
Yeah. I think right now Sharangovich is the center, and I think until they find a center, like a legitimate number one center, I think that's where Sharangovich is going to be. Mm-hmm. I don't think long term he's a center. I think long term he's more of a winger that can take some faceoffs. But I think right now he is a center.
I agree.
Sorry,
just an interesting tidbit. Going back to Martin Ferk, his wife is from Calgary, and I believe her family still lives here. So he's the kind of guy I could see once he's in this organization, he just keeps signing 1 years, whether it's AHL, NHL, to sort of be close to the family.
Now, this is the unfortunate. Now, my question is Ryan Huska have a farm? And I have a reason for asking that, because I mean, I think that Daryl Sutter put Michael Stone at the farm to keep him there for a while, and then got him out of the farm when needed.
Could the Flames do a farm lease agreement with Sutter's farm?
I wonder.
Could you have Brett ask his dad, "Hey, can we borrow it?"
Yeah,
the interesting thing to me talking about Daryl Sutter's farm is when he came out for Jerome's retirement, he got cheered. Like, I think there's still good relations there with Daryl.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I was just about to ask. Yeah, I still think I think the internet fan base didn't like him, but I think the Flames, the non-internet fan base, still appreciates Daryl Sutter.
Yeah, and I think even internally, he's still respected. He's still, a friend of the team. I don't think Huska has a farm, but I'm sure we could borrow a farm from one of the Sutters.
I feels like Huska has a basement suite, though.
That seems kind of creepy, putting a guy in your basement suite. That's more of a punishment.
That's probably fair. The more I look at Ryan
Huberdeau, if you don't score, you're going to go sit next to the boiler at Huska's basement.
Yeah. What was I going to say? The more I look at Ryan Huska, the more I feel like he looks like Pierre Maguire.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Or does Pierre Maguire look like Ryan Huska?
Maybe. Well, Huska's younger than Maguire.
That's true.
Yeah, so you got Igor, and I think just to stick with the centers here quickly, I don't know if Connor Zary is going to be a center in the league. I think Connor Zary is going to mostly be a winger.
Yeah, I think you need to work with Zary as a winger.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that they want to try Pospisil as a center. It sounds like that's going to be a training camp project.
Why not try it? I mean, the Flames are in a rebuild. They're not expected to do well. They know that. Why not try it? Right? You're not saying thou shalt be center for 82 games. Okay, we tried in training camp. It didn't work. He's back to a wing.
Yeah.
I would say right now the Flames have 3 actual centers: Michael Backlund, Nazem Kadri, and Kevin Rooney.
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of in there. Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I think that they still got some work to do on that end. And they know that, right? But you're not building this all in 1 year. So
yeah, and even if you look at the current roster as it sits, I mean, there's going to be some movement here, right? If I look at the current roster, and I'll pull up the roster that I'm looking at here for your video viewers on Daily Faceoff. But if I take a look at this, I mean, we've got Huberdeau, Backlund, Coleman, Zari, Sharangovich, Mantha, Kuzmenko, Kadri, Postel, Lomberg, Rooney, Dewar. We might not put them in this order, but you probably need a spot for Coronado, right? Coronado needs to go in somewhere. I don't think you put him on the fourth line where Dewar is. I don't think Dewar will be back as a Flame. That's just my thought. But, someone's going to have to move for that, right? So I think there's going to be some movement still of this roster. I don't know if Peltier starts in the NHL. I think he starts in the AHL. That's just me. But we saw guys like Adam Klapka, who I think might take that Dewar role. So
I could see Klapka in that fourth line role more.
Me too. So there's still guys that have to move here, and I think that there's easily a way to move someone and get a center.
I just don't know if I don't think Coronado's starting in the NHL.
You don't?
I think Coronado. I actually would keep Coronado in the AHL for one more entire year. But I wonder. We'll see him at the young. I think we'll see him at the Young Stars Classic, and we'll see where his game has progressed. But
and to me, the Young Stars Classic can only tell you so much because it's young against young. I think we've got to see him playing in real training camp to make that decision.
What I'm looking for with Coronado, though, at the Young Stars Classic is I think, is he playing with a lot more confidence in getting himself to the net, which I kind of felt like he lacked a little bit at the Young Stars Classic.
Yeah.
If I see that, then I'm like, okay, maybe this guy could at least get a look-see. But I'm kind of in the position, like, let's keep him down for an entire year. Peltier.
I think Peltier has to start in the American League.
Yeah, he's still waiver eligible yet, right?
So he's not. And after he came back and he had an injury and then he got another injury, I think he got derailed a little bit. So I think you've got to start him at the HL level and let him work his way up.
Yeah.
And then Dryden Hunt's an interesting guy too, because the coach liked him last year. I think he will be on the NHL roster.
I actually like Dryden Hunt. I may be in the minority on that, but I
think honestly, the guy that will replace Dewar is Dryden Hunt.
I could see it being a Lomberg. I think that fourth line could be a Lomberg Hunt battle or a Dewar Klapka battle. I think
Lomberg is in your lineup. Like I don't think there's any question about that. I think Lomberg, Rooney are your fourth line, and then it's a matter of who's on the other side. Is that Klapka? Is that Hunt? When I look at this roster, though, I mean, there's not a lot of guys you would say, yeah, let's move on from him. I mean, outside of Huberdeau, who we talked about, at least for this season. Backlund will be here. Coleman will be here. Zari will be here. Sharangovich will be here. Mantha will be here. Postel, Kadri, Kuzmenko. Like, who do you move out to make room?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of those moves that you're seeing, like the Coleman, Mantha, I could see being moved at the trade deadline.
Kuzmenko, yeah. Or even, like think about Lindholm that was done in January, right? I could see them happening mid-season.
Yeah, mid-season / trade deadline, yeah. The other question will be around Rasmus Andersson, and I don't see that trade happening this season. I think that is next off season that they have a look at that. And I don't know if you would have gotten anything near to what you should have gotten for Rasmus Andersson this year. Anyway, I think this is a guy that needed a bounce back year.
I agree. Should we talk about the Flames that left before we move on?
Yeah, let's talk about the Flame. Let's start with the Flame in limbo, which is Oliver Kylington. And I think this is a bit of a dicey situation. I think it sounded like he wanted a bit of a longer term commitment to whatever team he wanted to play with, whether that be the Flames or elsewhere. And I think the market didn't dictate to him. I kind of thought if he wasn't going to land in Calgary, he would have landed with Treliving in Toronto. I would not be surprised. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he comes back to Calgary. I know that they're a little bit plugged at defense anyway, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back. But I wonder,
based on some of Conroy's comments, though, it sounds like maybe there was a bit of an unhappy exit. Like the media's asked Conroy, is the door still open? And at one point he said it's open, but it's closing.
Yeah, Yeah,
I think honestly he's going to be a UFA until training camp, and someone Calgary or Toronto or someone will bring him in as a training camp walk on.
Yeah, he's going to be a PTO.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see happening. I think that probably.
And I don't know why. Like, I think Oliver's a great guy. I think he's gone through a lot of stuff. I don't know why he would think he's ready for long term. Like, if I'm the Flames, I would be arguing, you owe me years. We paid you for a year and a half to not play hockey. Right? You owe me time. I'm not going to give you 4 years. I'll give you 1 year and show me you're still ready. For all we know, you're not ready. We don't know what you are still. So do a 1 year and then we'll talk about afterwards. Like, I think it's kind of whoever the agent is that told him you can get long-term. I would seriously consider firing that agent.
Yeah. I don't think that there was ever a long-term. I mean, I could understand. I don't think 2 years was unreasonable for Oliver to ask
2
for.
years, I think, is the maximum you'd go for this guy, especially if you're not Calgary, you'd probably do a 1 year because you don't know the player as well. The Flames know the player. I think they could probably comfortably do 2.
Yeah,
but I don't think you can give him a raise if you're Calgary. Like, again, no. I think to me, you owe us money. Play at the same rate you did last year.
I don't know if I'm there. I'm not comfortable saying you owe us money because just with the mental health situation, I'm not there. But I also Oliver has Oliver has a right to ask for whatever he wants. That's his decision.
For sure.
And I'm not going to criticize him for it, but I do.
But whoever the agent is, I mean, agents are supposed to be looking at the market and coming up with comparisons. I would be curious to know who they thought that comparison was that they could get a long-term deal.
I wonder if it was OEL, Oliver Ekman-Larsson.
I don't know.
Even
then, I mean, at some point, you would think that he would have gone in wanting long-term and about July 10th go, okay, I don't want long-term anymore. But the fact he's still unsigned to me is a bit of a red flag. Like, it's what, the 27th of July today? 28th of July, something like that. 27th, like 27 days have gone by and this guy hasn't been signed. And, at some point you think a team would call him and say, hey, we'll do it for 1 year. Okay, let's go. Why is he still unsigned? Is it just that nobody really knows what he is? The team's not have confidence in him? Is he maybe looking at going back to Sweden? Like, I have to wonder why. He's a decent NHL defenseman. He's a good top 6 guy. You'd think someone would have tossed him a 1 year. And at this point, you can't be still holding out for multiple years.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It feels like there's a bit more to this situation than I think that we know. And I think that's
it. Yeah, and like I said, Conroy's comments on it led me to believe that maybe there was some sour exit there.
Yeah. I think it's a very tough situation. I do think Oliver Kylington is an NHL defenseman, but I think that it's tough when you have that year and a half off.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. It's tough to get more than a year or a PTO and see what
that's it. And I think the question to me still is, what is he? He's an NHL defenseman. Is he a top 4? Is he a bottom 2? Is he a 7? Like, we've seen him have good years. We've seen him have crappy years as a Flame. Like, if I'm a GM, I'm not bringing him in saying you're going to be in my top 4, even if I'm rebuilding. I'm saying I'm giving you an opportunity. And maybe he thinks he's worth more than he is. But to me, I still don't know what the player is.
I think he is OEL. I think that the OEL is Oliver Ekman-Larsson is a good comparison for Oliver Kylington. They're not awesome puck movers, but they're bottom 6 type of puck movers that you can and that you can occasionally toss in situations like power play penalty kill when your main power play penalty killing guy is out, right? Like, they're good depth pieces. But so I would always put Kylington as like 4, 5, 6, even like a kind of like a Brett Kulak, just kind of a quiet, dependable guy. Doesn't, what Brett Kulak did a lot is put the face-off in the offensive zone during the playoffs. That's what Oliver Kylington can do, right? And he's a good skater. And though that skating ability will not, that's something that will always be valuable, especially, looking where people are seeing that the favorites are the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, and the Oilers in particularly considered a really good skating team. I still think that Oliver Kylington, I think that there will be value there. The question is all of the other situation.
Yeah, and I think he will be a PTO signing. It might not even be with the team that brings him as a PTO. It could be crap. We got an injury. We'll bring this guy in last minute. A team we saw really bulk up their defense in the offseason was Utah. I could see that potentially being a fit, maybe with Valimaki. But I think this guy goes to a non-playoff team.
I wonder if Montreal wouldn't be a bad idea for him either.
I could see Montreal as well. Like he's a veteran defenseman, but not really. He's that guy where you need to be willing to, almost like where the Flames are going to have, some guys like Miramanov who are questionable, or Pakal who are questionable as being a top 6. You need that team that says, hey, we'll bring you in. You might be a 6, you might be a 7. It depends on how you do.
Yeah.
And I could also see him jumping around this year. Like I could see him being brought in, put on waivers, somebody claims him.
Even Ottawa actually would be a good.
I was just looking at Ottawa. Yeah. Ottawa, I could also see potentially. I mean, they're kind of full there, but if somebody were to get hurt, I could see him fitting well in Detroit.
Yeah, that was the other place I was thinking about too. Detroit would be a nice little place for him too.
And I also would not be surprised in the end if we hear that he's going back to Sweden for a year.
Yep. Yeah. I honestly hope for the best for Oliver Kylington.
But the fact that he's still a free agent on the 27th of July tells me that there's probably something there that we're not seeing.
Yeah. I think on both. Yeah. There's more to that story. I totally agree with you. In terms of any other Flame losses,
I mean, AJ Greer went to the Panthers. Dennis Gilbert went to the Sabres. Mark Pysyk still a UFA. I wouldn't be surprised if he's back here. He was never really a Flame. I think he was always a Wrangler signing. Ben Jones went to the Wild. The one that surprised me is Riley Damiani. Like the Flames traded for this guy from Dallas. He played okay in the AHL. I think he was an RFA they didn't tender, which surprises me. I think going to the Dell League is going to be good because I think it's a different style of play for him, but you think they would have at least signed the RFA rights and kept him in the system.
Maybe for Damani, he wanted an opportunity to play and he didn't see it, but I mean, he would be playing in the top 6 for the Wranglers.
Yeah, and he's a center, and there's short centerman there. So that's the one that it's like maybe Dallas got rid of him because they knew he didn't want to come back. And it was, Calgary needed a center, and maybe it was always kind of destined that he wasn't coming back. He was going to Europe, or who knows.
Yeah, because they traded Emilio Pettersson for Damani,
they did,
right?
And Pettersson got re-signed by Dallas.
Yeah. It's interesting.
So, I mean, not that Flames fans saw him. I saw him more in the Wranglers playoff run. I thought he was okay. He wasn't like their top centerman, but I thought he served an AHL purpose. And you never know. I mean, maybe they bring him back, but I believe he was an RFA. You'd think they would have at least tendered the RFA so they'd have first right to do that.
Right. And Justin Kirkland, they didn't bring back either.
They did. They re-signed Justin Kirkland to a 1-year deal on the 3rd for $775,000.
Oh, sorry. Good thing you're here to correct me.
And Kirkland, again, sort of a veteran. This will be an AHL signing.
Yeah.
And if not Ferk, I think Kirkland wears the C. I think he's your veteran guy wearing the C for the Wranglers.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think it's more likely you actually put it on Kirkland now that we're talking about it, because Ferk will probably come up and down, and you don't want your captain getting recalled. You don't want the equipment manager re-sewing that C all year. So I could see Ferkland. I don't think Kirkland plays in the NHL at all this year, so I could see strapping the C to him.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I would think like there would have to be a massive amount of injuries for Kirkland to play.
Yeah. And I think at some point, if you're the Flames and you're rebuilding, you take any young guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like before Kirkland, you take any of your young players.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It would be like, I think, a 4% chance that Kirkland's played in the NHL.
Yeah. I mean, Kirkland's 27, and we saw guys like, Dryden Hunt, 27, getting that call up. But I think we all know what Justin Kirkland is. And it's not that he's an NHLer. As we've talked about, he's a winger. I don't know where, actually, I guess he's center wing, but I don't think he's top of the depth chart in any metric.
No. I agree with you.
And he just, this guy does have a Flames background. He played for the Stockton Heat from 2019 through 2022, and then he was in the Anaheim system. So a guy who's familiar with the Flames, familiar with the organization, from Winnipeg. A guy who I think it's nice to see those guys who go, yeah, I enjoyed my time there last time. I'll come back.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Is there anything else we need to talk about with the Flames?
We talked about it briefly, but let's just go back to that Sharon Govich extension. 5 years, $28.75 million overall. That's, I think, just about $5.75 million. I like that deal. And I'm glad that Sharon Govich re-signed. Like you said, I know that they don't want to do, big, long deals, but this is a deal that I think even at the end of it, even if he's not as productive, you can move easily.
Yeah, it's an easy. Yeah.
He's a good enough NHL player that you'll be able to move on from that deal. And he's still young. I think you need to also be showing that, hey, we're bringing these guys in and we're building a core of moderately young guys. And I like it all the way around. It was a good deal, good money. He can buy all the Lego he wants with that kind of money. And I think the other thing is you've got to show people Calgary's desirable. And I think that's what this has done. Here's a guy who got traded here, could easily say, I don't want to come back. Got traded here, like the city, and is signing on long term. I think that says something as well.
Yeah, and I think, the debate will be that Sharon Govich is not necessarily an NHL center, but I do think that this is a guy that has the ability to be a 250-foot player that can consistently score 20 goals for you. He does have an offensive instinct. I think he's actually showed really well as a penalty killer. And I think his game got better as the year went on. And so I do see some growth for him. Is he a franchise guy? No, I'm not saying that. But I think that this is it's a very valuable piece that you do need these guys on your team to move ahead.
For sure. He, to me, is sort of like Michael Backlund, right? You've never been your franchise forward, but a guy that you're happy to have on that roster every year. And you'll bring him back as long as he wants to be there.
Yeah, it's like you're doing the Mount Rushmore. Like as you're heading towards Mount Rushmore of Flames, he's not going to be on your Mount Rushmore, but he might be a guy that as you're driving up to Scotia Place, there may be a picture of Igor Sharangovich and sort of his contributions. That's sort of a guy that I sort of see.
But I mean, think about how many depth Flames fans still think of. Marty Jelena. I mean, even our GM, right? Not a guy who'd be on Mount Rushmore, but a guy that Flames fans still equate with the team. Like, I think he's one of those guys that could be a lifetime Flame, whether on the ice, in the office, or just someone that we all like and enjoy and still think about. I mean, heck, people still talk about Mike Commodore.
Yep. The Flames have done really well with those type of players. They like in terms of the superstars, it's kind of blacked over the years with Calgary. But the valuable player, that's always been.
I think the big question of how well Sharangovich does is where he plays. And I don't think he's a centerman all year. I think you might go into the year saying, okay, we need you at center. Fine. I think he's going to be most productive when he's on the wing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's with that shot and kind of his placement. I agree with you.
But you've got to find a center then.
I know. And it's hard.
And that's where I think the Flames are stuck right now. They've got a decent lineup, but you need a center. And I mean, that could be a waiver pickup, even though you're not probably going to get the guy you need. But who comes out to put a center in becomes my question at this point.
Yeah. Well, maybe with Stan Bowman, he'll decide to put Leon Draisaitl on waivers.
Yeah, even then, the Flames are not worse in the league. Someone would have a higher claim priority than we did.
That's entirely true. That's
right.
Totally fair.
I mean, who would not put in a claim for him?
Yeah, probably everyone would.
Right. And if San Jose claims him, he's gone. Like, we're like 7th or 9th on that claim priority, depending on, I'd have to go check. He's not making it that far down.
That's entirely true. You make a good point there.
I mean, the only thing I could see happening, and I hate to say it, I could see Kuzmenko get flipped before the season starts for a center. If somebody says, hey, we need that kind of guy, we'll trade you a similar, struggling centerman, or Blake Coleman gets moved, which I don't think happens.
I don't think either of them happen. And I think one of the things that you have to think about with Kuzmenko is this might be one of the few reasons that you're going to Flames games this year.
Mm-hmm.
Is Kuzmenko. So
yeah, and I mean, somebody always gets hurt too. So maybe they just run this lineup and see who gets hurt, and then find a center internally or externally or whatever they need to do.
Yeah, you never know, right? I mean, and then you bring in a center on a PTO that hasn't been signed, and maybe you give him a shot too, right? So
yeah, but again, then someone's got to come out, and I think that becomes the harder question: is who comes out?
Yeah.
Are there still any centers available that are worth having as a free agent? I'm just going to take a look right now.
Well, I think that the question. I mean, I think the big question still waiting here is, well, yeah, Tyler. Okay, so what's available here? There's Tyler Johnson, who has played center. He's more of a wing.
And I don't think you're going with an older guy.
Cousins is a winger. Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're not really going with an older guy. I mean, I think still the big question. One of the big questions in the offseason is what's going to happen with Marty Nekash with Carolina. I mean, there's still a few other questions, but that's one of the bigger questions that still linger for August here. So,
yeah,
and you wonder. And then, of course, the other question is, I think there's a lot of teams are going to. The one guy that I still think is going to be as an interesting guy for the Flames, and I think an interesting guy for a lot of teams is just Pareikh Kotkaniemi.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto's got to make some moves. Like, I think that Conroy might kind of be waiting to see how dominoes fall, and maybe somebody comes to him and says, "Hey, we need you to take on this center salary" or something like that. Like, I think that this may not be a position that gets finalized until opening day, and I think Conroy just wants to sit and watch, like you said, how some of these moves happen. I mean, there's talk of big money moving out of Toronto. For somebody to take that, they're going to have to move other money, and I think that's exactly how you want to fill the center position.
Yeah, just wait for that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that we should talk about?
I think that's probably it for this point in the summer. I know last year we had the big free agent sign in August, which was Nazem Kadri. I don't see that happening. I think the Flames are pretty much done until training camp. So I think we maybe go watch the shovels in the ground at Scotia Place, and otherwise enjoy a month or so with no hockey.
Yes. So training camp back in September, Young Stars Classic back in Penticton in September. And we'll have to see about that. So yeah, you will be returning. The Fireside Chat will return back in August, September,
probably just for the Young Stars Classic usually, but we always say we'll come when there's news to be talked about. We haven't done the same recap you did. We're going to save some of this for the start of next season. But yeah, when there's Flames news, we'll be there to talk about it. You can always find us on social media as well, where we've slowed down for the summer, but we're still there when there's something to talk about. Anywhere you can find podcasts, audio, YouTube. The best place to go is firesidechat.ca, and you'll find at the top all of our links to our social media. That's the best place to find us, and all the links to where you can subscribe to us as well. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you'll find us. But yeah, I think we're entering a quiet period, and we'll be back around September.
I think we may do a couple of other ones for the August. We might do a Canucks MidSummer podcast. We haven't talked about that, but we will probably be mostly back in September. I kind of do some training camp previews. I have some ideas popping in my head that we could do, but we'll wait for that. But thanks, Dan, for coming on. Of course, you can follow us at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, and subscribe wherever you get your audio. We thank you for watching. We thank you for listening, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.